Hello and welcome. My name is Leah Kaki, and this is my 3D modeling podcast, Ambient 3D Animations. Today, we're going to be going through the settings in the Advanced tab for Pyro volume materials as well as volume materials here inside of Cinema 4D for rendering in Redshift. This will help you render out any type of VDB, volume, or Pyro simulation inside of Cinema 4D. If you want to know the basic settings, I've covered all of those in the last episode, so you can check them out there. And let's go ahead and get started. Let's jump into Cinema 4D. So here we are inside of Cinema 4D. I have this Pyro volume cloud material here. The settings in the Advanced tab are the same for both the Pyro volume material as well as the volume material. So this will apply to both of those in here. I have my material open here, and you can see we covered last time the basic settings. And today we are going into the Advanced tab, which is very exciting. Just as a quick note, so that your settings match mine a little bit closer, within Redshift under our globals, I do have a volume ray trace. I have a volume trace depth of 31. So that's multiple scattering. We talked about that in the last episode for how many bounces or scattering is happening within a volume as it's rendering, and that lightens it up a little bit and adds a little bit more realism. It looks nice. So those are my current settings. And we're going to be going through here today. So let's start off with your shadow density scale. So this is the shadow simulating density for your volume. So you can see we have some shadows on this cloud, and I have the IPR running so that we can see this rendering. And I'm going to go ahead and reduce this, and you can see that it lightens up those shadows a little bit while not altering the form of the cloud. So it isn't altering how the form looks like, how sometimes changing the settings for the scatter or the absorption can change the shape of the cloud a little bit. This one doesn't do that. It's mostly just simulating changing those and simulating the change in density through adjusting those shadows. So I think that's an interesting setting to just be aware of. I'm going to right click on this arrow to set it back to the default. We have this other option here called density remap range. And you can do most of what you need to do by just adjusting this old max value. So I'm going to just increase this, and you can see how it changes, and it's starting to become a little bit less and less of a cloud, and it's almost feeling like it's going to disappear. It's much more see-through, there's less to it. On the other hand, if I take it to the other extreme, 0.01, it becomes very bulky and boxy, and you can start seeing the individual voxels here. So the thing that this is usually used for is to hide these cube-like formations on your cloud or your smoke or whatever you're rendering. So the more you increase this, the less detail you have. But it also softens those edges, which can be a really nice effect. It makes it look a little bit more natural in that way. So that's remapping your density values for your volume. I'm going to go through the emission remap range in a moment. Emission remap range. We'll go through that in a moment. First, I want to go through the multi-scatter options here. So the extinction fall off, I recommend just leaving this at 0.2. This is basically simulating the higher trace depth for the volume without actually increasing the trace depth. So you can see that if I change this value to something higher, it looks a little bit darker. If I change this to something lower, it looks a little bit darker too. According to the manual, they recommend about 0.2, and that's the default of what it's set to. And it simulates that multiple scattering effect of brightening the cloud through those multiple bounces without actually increasing that number and increasing your render time. We talked about anisotropy in the basic settings, and you can find that right over here. So under your scattering anisotropy, and you can see that I have a little bit of it applied about 0.732, and that's affecting the direction of the light going through the cloud. I'm going to put this back to 0.732. And with that, let's go ahead and adjust this. So this is adjusting the fall off for that. So you can play around with this and just kind of get a feel for how it looks. You can see it's a little bit darker here. It's a little bit lighter here. I'm going to right click on this and set it back to the default of 1. We also have the start depth, and that's at about what bounce the multiple scattering effect starts happening. So right now we have it starting at 0. The higher I increase this, the darker the cloud will look, or the volume will look, because it has fewer of those bounces being simulated. So now it's pretty dark. I'm going to set this back here to 1. So those are basically the settings for this. I'm going to jump into this other scene here to go over the emission remap range. I'm going to start this at the beginning. We've been doing a lot of really realistic black body type rendering, fires type simulations and rendering styles. So I wanted to do something a little bit differently. So for fun, I changed the emission in here to be something a little bit less realistic and a little bit more stylized. I'm going to hit play, and it'll on the IPR, and you'll see that I made this pink for fun to do something different and break things up a little bit. Because we've been doing a lot of pyro, why not do something different and fun? Okay, so anyways, I wanted to cover the emission remap range with this. So this is dependent on the values you have for your emission, and depending on what software you're using to create VDBs for fire or anything with an emission VDB channel, it may have different numbers or different ranges, and you can adjust the old max to accommodate that. So if something comes in and it looks a little bit too bright or a little bit too dark, you can remap this by adjusting this value. You can see that as I increase it, this looks a little bit darker. And if I decrease it, it becomes a little bit brighter. So it's affecting the emission here through adjusting those values. So that may be helpful for your project. I'll set this back to the default. So it has been really fun going through all these settings with you. I hope you found this helpful, and if you did, please hit like. If you'd like to learn more things about pyro, I've already made a ton of episodes about it, so you can check out any one of those, or if you have a specific question, you can leave it for me in the comments, and I'm happy to help out with those. And it's been so much fun. Please hit subscribe and ring the bell if you'd like to be notified when new episodes come out. I try to cover a new topic each week, so I'm excited to see you here again, hopefully. Hopefully you'll come back, and see you here next time.